Today we're talking about learning Latin and using translations. If translations are good or if they're morally corrupt. Some would dig. So, I've seen in many posts, I've heard from students that using translations it's not reading and it's bad, it's cheating. This is kind of true, but not completely. I mean, if the end goal is to be able to read Latin fluently, linearly, without jumping around looking for verbs, and without having to have recourse to translations and dictionary all the time. Okay, so that's the end goal, like being able to read a Latin text, whatever text we want to read, be it something by Erasmus or I don't know, Columella. There's a great feeling to read a Latin text and just understanding it in Latin. That is a beautiful thing, really. But for a long time during the learning process, that's out of reach for harder texts. Now, one could say that it would be better to read texts that are at your level, so level appropriate texts that are very easy, that gradually become more and more difficult. And yes, I would say that that's the best thing. But there are, even then, if you are unsure about something, you might want to have recourse to some sort of translation. So I think there is some sort of, there is some truth to it. I mean, the feeling of sitting down with a text of, reading Ovid and just reading it and just seeing the imagery come alive from the Latin, and it's being 2,000 years old. We have this separation. We're still kind of seeing the mental images that Ovid painted for us. That's really cool. Okay, but I think translations are really useful. Really, really useful. Because they're a tool to make a text comprehensible, not comprehensive. Should learn Latin, should learn English someday. So they're a tool to make the text we're reading comprehensible, and then we can reread it and really read it only in Latin. So, but we can use translation to then verify, to make sure we understand, to make the text comprehensible. Or we can even read a section of the translation first, pre-read the text, so to speak, so we have a better grasp and kind of make our guesses more probable, limit the possibilities of our guesses when we're reading. So there are ways we can use translations to kind of bring our comprehension up to the level of the text. But we could read a much easier text instead. But if we're not doing that, if we're reading a text that's above our level, using a translation it's the way to get the text to our level. But of course, there is a caveat. We should really take care not to become dependent on translations. Like, oh, there's no chair here. Nothing to see here. Let's see. Yeah. So we should take care not to become dependent on translations and stand around in alleys trying to buy translations from shady people. That's not a good way to go, because you can kind of instill this sense of doubt in your mind where, I wonder if I understand. Better just check. And you start checking everything. I mean, sometimes you don't know. You're really uncertain. Like, do I really understand this word? And then check a translation. Yeah, I was right or I was wrong. But now I can understand the sentence, reread it, and start internalizing the vocabulary and syntax. But if we do this for every single sentence all the time, I have no real data for this, but I think there is a probability that we can create this dependency and really feel we always have to verify, just in case we're wrong. So that's a caveat, I would say. But overall, translations are very, very useful if we use them as a tool to bring our comprehension up to the level of the text. Now, if you're going out shopping for translations, there are some things to think about. Not all translations are created equal. Some translations are so free in terms of how they relate to the original Latin text that it's more or less a summary. Or they use a very different type of language. or they're more literal. And I would say look for texts that are translations that are as literal as possible, which means they're likely really, really unpleasant translations to just read in English or whatever language you're using. So a literal translation where you, as far as it's possible, have the English matching the Latin word for word, or at least sentence by sentence, and not covering up things. So you have 3 words here or you have 1 Latin word here, and it's just covered up in some sort of adjective connected with a noun here. And you kind of get the idea, you transfer the idea. And I mean, creating a good translation is something completely different. We're talking about probably, in terms of translation quality, poor translations, in the sense that they're not beautiful, they're not readable really. Readable they are, but so we want something that's as close as possible to the Latin text. And it's quite hard to find. I mean, we have the Loeb series. The translations are fairly close sometimes, but other times they're very, very far removed. So you kind of wonder where you are. So in our app Leantibus, where we have all the these Latin texts with audio and translations, we used to go with kind of public domain translations that were, I mean, as close as possible. But we realized that most translations they're too free. So for someone who really needs the translation, who's reading a text far above their level, a fairly free translation creates this. You have to spend so much time kind of figuring out where things are if the sentences don't match up. So what we're doing now on Leantibus is we create these Leantibus literal translations, which are really literal, but still readable English. But we try to make it so that each Latin sentence match each English sentence. And this is so you can really quickly just see, okay, what does this sentence mean? Okay, that, and just switch back. Or you can start reading the English and go to the Latin. So I think overall, we shouldn't fear translations. I tell students, don't fear translations. They're a tool. They're a tool to increase comprehension. They're not something you should spend all your time on. It's like everything else when learning Latin. You have dictionaries, you have maybe a commentary, you may have a grammar. We don't spend all time in one tool. When we do that, it just ceases to be useful. It might be useful sometimes to look up a word or look up some form or a rule in some nice German work of syntax that has 2,000 pages. That's a fun thing to do. But overall, we shouldn't rely too much on the tools and just focus on reading and understanding. And if we feel that we need these tools all the time, a good question to ask is this text not a little bit too hard for me? I mean, there is no shame in this. I mean, there's this quest for the arcane glory of reading the authentic Latin text as soon as possible. And there is, of course, eternal glory to be found there. But before reaching that stage, I think it's very helpful to read easy text at your level as much as possible and reread. I mean, rereading, I think, is the thing, re-listening as well, is the thing that really makes a difference. So I'll say this as a closing point. One of the, I think, biggest wastes of time, not completely, but in terms of learning Latin, is to spend a lot of time like going through and understanding a text and then just continuing onwards to understanding and kind of hacking your way through another text. Now, I think you should read texts that you don't have to hack your way through, but when you've gotten to a point where, okay, I understand this chapter, it's worth a lot to just go back, listen and read it a couple of times without having to rely on the tools that made the text comprehensible to you. So that's my 2 cents or 10 cents. What do you say? I don't know. I'll go study English now. About learning, using translation. They're really useful. really, really useful, but can become a crutch if we rely too much on them. Now, that's all I had. Tantusta. Bene volete.